You guessed it. 1, 2, and
It was?
oh, you're 5.
Okay.
1, 2, and 5.
Number.
450. And we're doing first, second, and fifth.
So I remember singing the third verse before, but I don't ever remember singing the fourth
I
verse.
don't know.
The oft neglected and never forgot first verse.
The third one, yes.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever sang the fourth verse.
That's a good, I mean, it's a good word for that one too. You can sing it on your own.
See, after.
I wasn't suggesting that we should.
You can sing it on the way home.
Yeah.
That was more a commentary on the fact that no Baptist has ever sung the fourth.
Well, you can do it really weird and do the first and second back to back, and then do the chorus. Then you do the third and fourth in the chorus, and then the fifth in the chorus.
I don't know, I might get too confused.
See, that sounds really complicated.
I'll put in something to do that.
Music is complicated enough.
Okie dokie.
All right.
Well, Tammy, would you pray and get us started?
Sure. Dear Lord, we thank you for this night. We thank you for being able to come together and look at your word together, and pray that as we do so, that you would teach us more about you, that you be with all those that are not here, and those that are ill, Lord, that you comfort them and bring them healing. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right, so we are in Acts chapter 18. We're going to start chapter 18 tonight. We have been looking at Paul in his missionary journeys. Last we saw Paul in Athens. Recall we started off Paul going on his second missionary journey, leaving Antioch, crossing what essentially is Turkey, and this is modern day Turkey. And he comes all the way over here, and he goes into Macedonia. He stops at Philippi. Then he goes on to Thessalonica. Then he goes on to Berea. And then, as the Thessalonican Jews hear about the success he's having, or the success the gospel is having, really, in Berea, they go run him off from there. And so he takes off for Athens, and he ends up down in Athens. And while in Athens, he goes to what's called the Areopagus, which was It's also known as Mars Hill. You may have heard it referred to as Mars Hill in certain translations or by pastors or teachers or somebody. It's the same thing. The Areopagus is Mars Hill. It's just the Areopagus is the Greek version of Mars Hill, and it's because it was named after Ares, who was the Greek god of war, and the Roman version of of Ares is Mars, and he's the Roman god of war. And so, same thing. And so he goes there, and he sees all these idols. He sees all these pagan idols and false gods and everything. And we're told that the Spirit moves him, that the Spirit stirs him up. And then he sees this random altar that is just there in the middle of it all. And on the altar, it's written to the unknown God. And he's like, well, hey, let me tell you about this unknown God. And so he goes into, remember when we talked about pretty much the first ever apologetics speech, and he starts explaining who God is, who God really is, this unknown God, this God that they don't know, because they know pretty much all the other ones, right? They have pretty much everything. Remember, Luke even gets kind of a dig in at one point with the Athenians. He says, yeah, some of these guys just sat around all day just talking about stuff and learning new stuff. That's all they ever did, right? And so they were very much about being willing to listen to whatever somebody had to say. So that works in Paul's favor. However, there aren't a whole lot of converts, and so there aren't a whole lot of people who choose to follow Jesus while Paul is speaking there. And so then that brings us to chapter 18. And can I get somebody to read Acts chapter 18, verses 1 through 8? Is that your way of volunteering to read? No.
After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. And he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. And he went to see them, and because he was in the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that the Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. For now I will go to the Gentiles. And he left there and went to the house of a man named Titus, Judas, a worshiper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. Cyprus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household. And many of the Corinthians heard Paul, believed, and were baptized.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Comments, questions, observations? Stein remarks?
I think it's interesting that Paul was a Jew and a Pharisee of Pharisees, and he persecuted the church. And then after having come to know the Lord, in a very short period of time, he was persecuted by the Jews. And I just think that's very interesting that he would, that he all of a sudden was in the role that he himself had been persecuting by the Jews.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and actually, on the other side of the handy-dandy map tonight, we have not quite a timeline, but pretty close. So I haven't been able to find a timeline big enough for you to see, to put on the board, so I'm just going to write it, and you may or may not be able to read it once I've written it. But so Paul's second missionary journey is from AD 49 to 52. So yeah, we're talking not quite 20 years yet. We're getting close to 20 years since Christ has been crucified and raised from the dead. So this for most of us, 20 years seems like a significant amount of time, right? But in the span, but in the overall history, and when it comes to quote unquote religion, 20 years is nothing, right? And so Jesus was crucified and raised from the dead just about 20 years ago, and already we have seen guys like Paul who were just, like you were saying, just the worst of the persecutors of the church have come and their lives have been completely changed and completely made different. And now he's the guy who's going around preaching the gospel, and he's the guy getting persecuted. Now, some important things to keep in mind here is that Claudius is the emperor at this point. He reigned from 41 to 54 after his nephew, believe it or not, was assassinated. Caligula was the emperor before him, and that was his nephew. And then his nephew gets assassinated, and Claudius takes over, and he rules for 13 years. And it doesn't end particularly great for Claudius either. He was probably assassinated by his wife. She probably.
Sounds like he deserved it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so when we're talking about the Roman emperors, let's see, the first 12 Roman emperors, 9 of them were assassinated. It was like 1 or 2 committed suicide, and then 1 or 2 died of natural causes. Augustus dies of natural causes, but after that, they all get assassinated for one reason or another. And yeah, Claudius was not a nice guy. He actually, he probably never even should have been emperor. Do what?
Just like in the job description.
Yeah, you will get assassinated at some point. And here's the crazy part. Eventually, it's the Praetorian Guard who starts assassinating the emperors, and they were the emperor's bodyguards. And so eventually, in fact, it was Caligula got assassinated by his bodyguards, and they put Claudius in charge. Now, there is a possibility that they thought Claudius would be really easy to control. Because, yeah, I know, I hear you. Because Claudius he had a limp, and he had a stammer. He had some sort of, we don't really know what disease he had when he was young, but he had some kind of disease that left him with a limp and a stammer, and so everyone thought he was stupid. In fact, his mother said he was stupid, but he actually turned out to be a pretty able emperor and a pretty capable emperor. In fact, he's the guy who conquered Britain for the Roman Empire. He added several other territories that you can't see right now. That's on the map. And so he was actually a pretty effective emperor. Even though everybody, of course, back then, if you had something wrong with you, they just assumed there was something wrong with you. And so, but yeah, so he's ruling the empire at this point. Augustus is gone, Pilate's gone, all those guys are gone. And then Claudius expels the Jews in 49, in AD 49. Now, the reason he expels the Jews, and of course that's, we read that here, this is how Paul comes to meet Aquila and Priscilla in Corinth, is because we're told that Claudius has kicked all the Jews out of Rome. So basically, what happened was Suetonius, a Roman historian, records that there were these riots, basically, among the Jewish people over someone named Chrestus. And now Chrestus was a name that was often given to slaves. However, Suetonius was writing this about 20 years after all of this had happened, and so there's a reasonable chance, and there's a really good chance, that he meant Christ. And so what likely has happened here is that the Jews in Rome have gotten so angry about the name of Christ being preached among the Romans, among the Roman Jews, that they have started fighting with each other. They've started rioting and this sort of thing and causing unrest in the city, which has caused Claudius to just say, okay, well, let's get rid of all of them. Let's throw them all out. And here's the thing. That's not unusual, right? We've already seen this. Remember in Thessalonica, let's go back to the map. In Thessalonica, they were aligning themselves with evil men. Remember? They aligned themselves with evil men in order to run Paul and Silas and Timothy out of there. And so they were, the Jews were not taking this whole Jesus is the Christ, Jesus is the Messiah thing very well. Right? They were rebelling against it. They were fighting against it. We're going to see some of that tonight too. So they had a real issue with this. They were willing to get violent and to get physical over it. And Stephen's a perfect example, right? Stephen gets stoned to death for preaching Christ crucified and raised from the dead. And so all of this is happening. And like I said, the Jews were expelled from Rome, and then at that point, the Romans didn't really care if you were part of the problem or not. They just wanted you gone. Because I've said before, the Romans basically wanted two things. They wanted you to behave yourself and give them your money, right? They wanted to collect the taxes and everybody followed the law. That was it. And if you couldn't do those two things, they had a really easy way of fixing it. They killed you. You want to break the law? You die. You don't want to pay your taxes? You die. And so there's actually probably a good thing that they got kicked out of Rome instead of getting murdered, because that's, worse. And so they spread out all over the place, and some of them end up in Corinth. Didn't have my glasses on, can't. There it is. So now here's the thing. This, of course, wasn't the first time that Jews had been expelled from somewhere, right? They were expelled from the homeland to start with several hundred years before this. And now, honestly, it wasn't the last time either. In fact, it wasn't the last time the Romans did something like that. In the 70s, in AD 70, up to 77 or so, the Jews rebel in at the time it was still called Judea. The Jews rebel in Judea and in Jerusalem, and then when the Romans defeat them, they level the temple. We're literally told in history that they took the bricks apart, or that they took the bricks down and melted the gold, because there was gold in the bricks that made up the temple. So they melted the gold out of the bricks. They literally took it apart brick by brick. And when they did that, they actually deported many Jews out of Judea and sent them all over the place. And fun fact, and this is going to get a little political, but I already started it, so I'm going to finish. That's when it becomes known as Palestine. That's how this region got its name, Palestine, because Palestine was the Latin form, the Latin version of Philistine. And once the Romans had been so ticked off by the Jews that they annihilated Jerusalem, they decided to really stick it to the Jewish population. They were going to name the whole area, the whole province, after the Jews' ancient mortal enemies, the Philistines. And because, again, Palestine was the Latin version of Philistine, it became known as Palestine. And so that's how it became. There was never any people group called the Palestinians who landed there and changed the name or anything like that. It was all purely the Romans doing to try and take one more shot at the Jewish people. But of course, that wasn't the last time that they got expelled from somewhere either. In England, Edward I, around 1290 or so, expelled the Jewish population from England. Basically, he wanted their money, and he wanted to raise taxes for all of his wars in France. And Parliament was like, well, hey, how about you get rid of the Jews, and then we'll give you your taxes. And he was like, cool, that'll work. And so he expelled the Jews. And then Spain, in 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, Spain kicked out their Jews. That sounded way worse. I mean, it's true, but it sounded way worse than it did in my head. I'm sorry, what?
Did they send it with Columbus?
No,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. In 1492, the Spanish had just finished reconquering Spain from the Moors, the Muslim Moors. And so part of their thing was, now that they had just reunified the country under the Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, they wanted to have a national religion too. They wanted everybody united under one belief system. And so the Jews had to go. The Jews had to go, the Muslims had to go, everybody who wasn't Catholic had to go. And so they expelled the Jews in 1492, which still rhymes. It's unfortunate, but it does rhyme.
And they don't really ever come back to Israel again until 1948.
Yeah.
As a country.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Israel did, so it stays Palestine for the next nearly 2,000 years. And it gets, so it changes hands once the Roman Empire falls. Let's see who's next. So the Byzantines would have been next. And then after the Byzantines, the Muslim Arabs come up and they take it. And then, of course, they go up through there. And then after them, it kind of morphs into the Ottoman Empire, who controls all this. Then after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire is divided, that's when the British get a hold of it. And then and then after World War II, it is divided and it is given its independence. And here's another thing that's sort of political, I guess, but it's important to remember when the UN voted to partition Palestine into two different parts, they did not vote to partition it into the Israeli and Palestinian parts. They voted to partition it into the Israeli and the Muslim parts. And that's how it got divided. It was never divided because, again, there has never been a people group. In fact, after the 6-Day War, this is just, I mean, I know it's political, but it's really just history. It was up until the it was up until the 6-Day War in the 1960s when they were still, everybody who lived in Palestine, or it was Israel by then, was either considered Israeli or Arab. And it wasn't until after the 6-Day War. So what happens is all these countries, all these Muslim countries, tell the Arabs who are living there, hey, if you leave, because we're going to come in and kill all the Jews, and so if you leave really fast, then once all the Jews are dead and gone, we'll let you go back in there and you can have the whole thing. And so they were like, well, that sounds great. And so they all left and they came to Jordan, which is basically over here. And then the Israelis found out what was happening, so they strike first. And in 6 days, they basically put a whooping up on all the Arab countries around them. And then the Arabs who left were like, okay, we want to come home now. And the Jews were like, not so fast, my friends. You know, we know what you were planning, so you can't come home. And then they turned to their Arab friends, their Muslim friends, and they're like, hey guys, they won't let us in. And they're like, ooh, that's too bad, because we're not letting you in here either. So then, so that's how and it was after that suddenly they were now being called displaced Palestinians. Up until they left, they were Arabs. And then once they left the region, suddenly now they are displaced Palestinians. And so that's what they've been for the last, nearly 80 years now?
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if I live somewhere for 80 years, I'm from that place. If they've lived there for 80 years, they're from that place. I'm an American. Doesn't matter if I get kicked out of America, they're from this place. Explain how they get kicked out of whoever they are, get kicked out of Palestine, and they're displaced Palestinians. How is that wrong?
So again, there's no such thing as an actual Palestinian. because they were considered Arabs right up until,
Yeah, but when was the last time we could call somebody with dark skin an Arab and get away with it? I mean, come on.
well, I hear you,
Well, see,
but,
actually, there's still not a country of Palestine.
yeah, there's
It's a
never been,
settlement. It's a settlement.
there's never been a
So
nation.
it's just like a community? Okay,
It-
I didn't know that. That makes everything,
So it's been, yeah, there's never been an independent sovereign nation called Palestine. And so, again, they were just like there are Arabs in Syria, there are Arabs in Egypt, there are Arabs in Saudi Arabia, there are Arabs in Turkey, there were Arabs in Palestine. And then once they left, most of them chose to leave because they were hoping that their neighbors there would kill all the Jews and get rid of them.
got
And
it.
so most of them chose to leave. And so at that point, that's when they suddenly started calling them
Who
Palestinians.
started calling them that?
The other Arabs. So no, seriously, because so here's the thing.
Sorry.
If you have two people groups living in a country, and then one of them leaves, and one of them are your friends, and now you start saying, okay, they're not just, they're no longer Arabs like us, they're Palestinians, and that's their homeland. Now we can use them, and we can keep them in refugee camps for the next 40, 50, 60, 80 years, whatever. And we can continue saying, see, they're displaced, the Israelis are being terrible to them, and now we can continue these hostilities with the Israelis or whoever it is, because now we can say that this is rightfully this other people group's land rather than the Israeli. And here's the thing, there are a lot of Arabs who live in Israel, and they're the freest Arabs in the world. I mean, they're allowed to live wherever they want. They're allowed to go to colleges. They're allowed to do whatever they want. Just not,
You mean they're human beings?
yeah. The only thing that they're not allowed to do is kill people. So, which,
Here.
is sort of a standard rule for most countries. But they're like, hey, yeah, do what you want. Just don't kill people. Yeah.
There was a lot of things after World War II. Boundary lines were changed, nations were changed. I mean, it took years
Right.
to sit through it.
Yeah, and for anyone to, because I've heard it suggested by others that, this is not the homeland of the Jews. It's just nonsense. I mean, there has been a nonstop Jewish presence in Israel since Abraham got there. I mean, this is,
Okay, but is Israel and Palestine the same thing?
yeah,
It's the same piece of land.
it's the same piece of land, yes.
They renamed it after the Romans conquered it
Yeah,
in 70 AD.
yeah, after the Romans,
Okay, so when somebody said, we're talking about land mass at the moment, right?
yes,
If somebody says Israel and the other person says Palestine, they're talking about the same piece of land.
right.
That's where my confusion came in. I thought there were two pieces of land.
Yeah, so, no, it's the same thing.
Property
And,
line.
and that's why if you ever hear someone say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what they're talking about is annihilating all the Jews. Because they're talking about from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which is all there is of Israel.
Okay.
And so they claim that that is still Palestine. In fact, you'll probably never meet an Arab or Muslim who would call it Israel. They all still refer to it as Palestine.
They call Bethlehem part of Palestine.
You know, yeah, well,
It's in the West Bank area, but they consider it to be Palestine, where Bethlehem sits.
they claim the whole thing. Like I said, when they say from the river to the sea,
Oh, yeah.
they're talking about
So
the
what's
entire
the name
country.
of the country?
Israel. Right now it's Israel.
So there is no Palestine.
No man.
Then why is Palestine in the news?
It's a political argument.
Yeah.
Oh,
Politics.
okay.
It does degenerate
So
into.
it doesn't have to make sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the whole thing, from way back to the Romans kicking people out, and the bodyguards killing them, and than chasing these others down and trying to manipulate the one. You might as well be talking about American politics.
Thank you.
You know, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
It goes on
I guess
forever.
history does repeat itself.
Yes, it does.
yeah,
The differences between the United States and other countries, the land that Russia conquered during World War II, they kept. The United States doesn't do that.
right.
Give it back.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, those two world wars really kind of messed things up. But
But Israel came out of it. I
Yeah.
mean, the prophecy had been there forever that Israel would be restored, and nobody knew how.
right,
Well, it came about because of those two wars.
yeah, and there is a lot of
World Wars I and II were fought over Israel?
no.
Yeah.
So,
One
no,
of
no.
them was one of the fallout was that
Okay.
Israel was created because the Russia wanted to get rid of the Jews out of Russia,
Right.
and other people kept kicking out the Jews, so they finally says, fine, we'll just put you back in Israel. So they created,
Okay.
gave Israel back to Israel and said,
Okay.
fine, y'all all go back to Israel.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of stuff,
There's a lot more to that story.
Multiple
Not-
semesters
Yeah.
of studies.
and then
Maybe I need to take some classes.
Yeah.
on it. It's insane.
And then the British got involved and promised everybody everything, just trying to win World War I. And they told the Arabs, yeah, you can have it. And they told the Jews, yeah, you can have it. And then at the end of World War I, the British took it. And so then the
One or
Arabs
two.
As are most.
do what?
What, World War I or II?
World War I. After World War I, the British took it. And the Arabs were like, hey, I thought we could have it. And they're like, yeah, we were just kidding. And the Jews were like, hey, I thought we could have it. And they're like, yeah, we were really just kidding on that one. And so then they kept it till after World War II. And then at the end of World War II, the British were like, we're really tired of having an empire. Let's start getting rid of some of it. 'Cause-
Some of the less floofy parts of it.
They
Yeah.
got rid of a lot of it.
yeah, the British Empire pretty much came apart after World War II. So, but anyway.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. I mean, look, this is all.
Bridge University next fall.
Yeah, there you go. This is all important stuff. I mean, and that's what I've tried to do with our study through Acts is link what we would call secular history in with the Bible, because neither one of them happened separately, right? The history that's recorded in Scripture was happening at the same time all this other stuff was going on.
I have a timeline book that has that in there. I guess I'll
It's
go
pretty
home and look
amazing.
at that.
Yeah, there are some really good timelines out there. Rose book of charts and math. They do a really good job with lining up like Roman history, biblical history, and world history all together, so that you can follow that through.
I like the application Bible, my NIV one has it in
Okay.
there. Yeah, it's really cool. You can just go along and read, gosh, China was building their wall when this thing in the Bible was happening, and I was like,
Yeah,
who knew?
right. Yeah,
Well, because I always hear, I guess, Bible stories in context.
But in
So
isolation.
I don't, yeah, in isolation.
Yeah, I never
In
knew that.
isolation, so it never really occurred to me.
Right, because I took world history in college, and I took, Bible in Sunday school, but I never put the two together.
Yeah, it's like this break in my
Yeah.
brain that
Yes.
I have to.
Very totally.
yeah, and that's a really common thing. Again, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it this way, go through Acts this way, so that we can start forging the two together, so that we understand that there were other reasons for some of the things that were going on that Luke records, that there were political ramifications and political actions and activities going on that kind of drove some of this stuff as well.
I watched a documentary of that area, and basically they were just showing boundaries from like Abraham's time. How the boundaries just shrank and expanded from different conquerors. It's a lifetime of study, and
Yeah.
you're still not going to
So
catch it.
there's lots of minutes.
Now, let me ask you a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, there's a lot of minutia.
What decade in history did Fiddler on the Roof occur.
Did what?
I think that was I think it took place before World War I, so it would have been the early 19 teens or late.
But it showed them in Russia
Yeah,
in the context of that movie, and they were being
And you see
expelled
at the end of it,
that
they're getting
movie.
kicked out.
yeah. So a lot of Jewish people end up in Russia, but the Russians had, I want to say it was like 3 large pogroms where they drove Jews out in their history. I can't remember which years they all occurred.
It was when they still had a czar, though. They did not yet have they were not communists. They still had a czar.
Yeah, it was
during
still
that
under.
movie.
Yeah, it was still under the Tsar, so it would have been before World War I.
Yeah, but God allowed the Jews to be scattered many times
Yeah,
because of their actions.
yeah,
You're
But
going
it
to be
was
scattered,
shortly
you're
before
going to be driven
World War I.
from your land.
yeah, and so this is one of those opinions that I have that gets really deeply unpopular. When you look at the history and what was going on in Egypt, and how the Jews and why the Jews left Egypt and came to the Promised Land, it mirrors really, 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 really close to what happened to the Jews during World War II in Europe. Because you had a dictator who was bent on destroying the Jews and was murdering children and anybody else who got in his way, and that's when the people cried out to God. That's when God heard them and brought them to the Promised Land. Now, World War II, 1930s, 1940s in Germany and eventually Europe, you have a dictator who's bent on destroying the Jews, murdering children, and anybody who gets in his way. And in the end, God brings them back to the Promised Land. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's legitimate to say that this is the Israel that was promised. Because there is that argument now. Well, how do you know that just because they have this country has the same name of the ancient Israelites doesn't mean it's the same thing? Well, okay, what did you expect it to be called? Happy God People Land? I mean, God promised to reestablish his kingdom. He promised to reestablish Israel. What was he going to call it other than Israel? So,
why did everybody, and this probably, I hesitate to, why does everybody hate the Jews?
that is a great question.
Chosen people.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
They didn't like it.
because even the Portuguese, I've got a list here of countries who have expelled the Jews. The Portuguese and the French did. Now, the Portuguese kicked the Jews out basically because their king wanted to marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. And they were like, okay, great, that's a wonderful match, but you gotta kick all your Jews out first. And so the king of Portugal was like, well, that's a no-brainer, and kicked all the Jews out. Then the French wanted their money. Again, they wanted their money. And so, because in most European countries, even in the medieval times, in the early 1700s, you already had laws in a lot of European countries that barred the Jews from owning property. And so and this is why there is that stereotype that the Jews are all the banks are controlled by the Jews and all that kind of thing, because the only thing that they could really do to make a living was to lend money and then charge interest on it and become money lenders. And so, yeah, because they couldn't own property. And back then, if you didn't own property,
All the money.
yeah, and so that's what ended up happening, and so then that's where you get the stereotype that the Jews own all the banks and run the global economy and all that kind of happy stuff.
Might not be a stereotype.
Well, let's not get into all that.
Stereotypes are there for a reason.
Well,
They're
that's
only
true. And
characters.
they did end up owning a lot of the banks and loaning a lot of money because that's the only thing that they could do, and so that's
Then it's
That
not a
makes perfect
stereotype.
sense.
do what?
Then it wouldn't be a stereotype if they really did it.
Yeah. I mean, and they adapted, and so they adapted to that, and yeah, they got a reputation.
I've always wondered if like obviously the country of Israel, all that is the same, but like the covenant between like God and ancient Israel, that still applies with like modern Israel, because it's not like the same kind of theocratic state, right?
So here's the thing, we're told, we see it happening in Revelation, but we're also told, Paul in Romans talks about the fact that for a time, temporarily, the natural vine has been cut off so that the wild vine could be grafted in. But eventually, that natural vine is going to be grafted back in. So there is going to come a point where Israel cries out to God, really this time, right? To the God, to Christ. Eventually, now, how many people there are when they do that, what that looks like, who all that is, I have no idea. But at some point, there will come a reconciliation between the Israelites, again, whoever that is, whatever's left, and God through Christ. And so, again, don't know when or what that looks like, but we do know it will happen. Because God even says in the Old Testament, when he makes his covenant with them, that this will be your land forever. And we're told multiple times that God's promises are irrevocable, right? And so whatever God has promised, he's going to honor, period. Now again, we don't know what that looks like, how many people it's going to be at the end, but some form of Israel is going to come back to God through Christ at some point.
Well, the covenant is like a contract. I will give you this if you do this.
Yeah, but absolutely, and it goes even deeper than that, though, right? Because they would cut up. They would literally call it cutting a covenant, because they would cut up animals, and then they would meet in the middle, and they would say, "You do this, I'll do this, and we'll all do this," and then they would end it with, "And if I don't, may it be done to me exactly as it has been done to these animals." In other words, if I break my word, you can cut me up into pieces. Now, here's the interesting thing. When God made his covenant with Abraham, Abraham did not meet him in the middle. God walked through the dead animals and made the covenant himself. And then when God made the covenant with us, through Christ and Christ alone, we didn't meet him. He came down to meet us, and he died and cut the covenant in himself, died and rose again. And so the two covenants that God has made, the old covenant with the nation, the Jews, the nation of Israel, and then the new covenant with the church, were never made by us, because God knew there's no way we were going to keep the covenant. There's no way we could. And so he made the covenant himself, in himself, by himself, with himself, because he knew not only could he keep the covenant, but he would keep the covenant.
So you have conditional and unconditional covenants.
Right.
And there was no condition placed on the Abrahamic covenant.
Yeah. Because he knew Abraham was never going to keep it. In fact, when you look at when the people at the end of Joshua, at the end of Deuteronomy, when Moses is reading out the law, the people are saying, "Yeah, we're going to do that. Yeah, we're going to do that." He doesn't say, "If there comes a day when you break it." He says, "When you break it, your words are going to be used against you." And they're all like, no, that'll never happen. He's like, no, when you break it, your words are going to be used against you. You're going to be witnesses against yourselves. Because, yeah, we could never keep that covenant. And that's why it's a big deal that our salvation in Christ is a permanent thing, and that it's important to understand that we cannot lose our salvation. I went to school with a guy, God bless him, bless his heart, right? He was like, "Well, I know that no one can pry me out of the hand of God, but what about if I slip out?" It's like,
It has to be intentional.
I had a professor who I would quote on occasion, "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. What are you talking about?" And so, yeah, there's no slipping out of the hand of God. There's no getting pride out of the hand of God. There's no escaping the hand of God.
He's holding a lot of people.
What if you just...
You just wiggle that
We
one.
may visit somebody,
Let me wiggle
That's
out.
not going to happen.
It's like a meerkat trying to sneak out.
Well, then you follow back in the same thing, you don't know a man's heart.
I'm sorry?
You don't know a man's heart.
No, absolutely.
He could have a master's in theological, he didn't know everything there is to know, just like Satan, he still hadn't accepted Christ.
There are
He
guys...
may say to you that he did, but you don't know his heart.
Yeah. There are guys with PhDs in the New Testament, PhDs in theology, and have no idea who Jesus is. I mean, and it doesn't take long to talk to them to figure it out. That they,
Guess that you don't. I ran into a guy that is a friend of some acquaintances of mine, and I've been around him a couple of times at social gatherings. And they tell me, leave him alone, don't talk to him.
Yep.
You can't beat him.
Bringing it up.
He's smarter. I
well,
mean, he's more educated than you.
yeah.
And has a PhD in English, so. But the thing about it is, he doesn't let it go.
Mhm.
You know, he'll hear somebody talking about God or Christ or Jesus, and he has to make a comment. But I'm not allowed to make it. I have to leave him.
Yeah. I've never been great at leaving it alone.
Some things you'll just never win, but you never know what God's doing.
It may not be for them, it may be for the people who are watching.
See, I have this personality quirk where I am convinced that the only reason you don't agree with me is because I just haven't explained it the right way yet. And if I just keep telling you and explain it in a different way, you're going to see how wrong you are, and you're going to agree with me. It's
My husband does that. I finally say, it's not that I don't understand what you're saying, it's that I don't agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we concluded about like where the Pharisees were at, was in the times of Jesus when they would argue with him.
Yeah.
Because I think they totally got who Jesus probably was, in their opinion, probably, but that they didn't agree.
Well, they
They
definitely
didn't want to accept that he was who they could see he was.
they definitely understood who he claimed to be, and they saw that he was kind of proving it.
Not accepting it.
But, yeah.
What isn't the Messiah that was talked about? I mean, I might have thought so. They were waiting for a warrior. They
Yes.
weren't waiting for a lamb.
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and so by the time Jesus is born in Bethlehem, the Pharisees were waiting for a warrior king Messiah. That's what they were wanting another David. They were waiting for David to return. And so that's what they thought they were going to get in Messiah. And now the Sadducees, who were also a fairly large part of the political spectrum in Judea, they had just moved past the idea of a physical Messiah entirely. They saw the Messiah as a sort of idea, as a spirit, as more of a feeling than an actual person. And so the Sadducees, so nobody was looking for a Messiah like Jesus. And so that's why everybody, or so many, rejected him, because the Pharisees wanted a warrior king and the Sadducees just wanted to feel good about everything. And so...
But there's no resurrection.
That's right.
Every time I laugh at that, it's funny no matter who says it.
Well, I had to say it before we did.
Yeah, I was there thinking, you stole my joke, Tammy. But I stole it from someone else, so...
Oh, that's an old
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah, it's been around a while. Yeah, that's the Pharisees were like, that's why they're sad, you see. And then Peter was, excuse me, they spoke the King James English. Thank you very much. There was actually a professor at Pensacola Bible College who made the claim that even if Paul himself walked up and with a Greek version of the New Testament and showed him where the King James was wrong, he would still believe the King James over Paul and the original Greek.
You don't even, in Arkansas, you don't even read anything with the King James.
Yeah.
They don't even want to hear it.
A lot of places.
Yeah, I had about a third of a church get up and walk out on me one time because I preached from the New American Standard and not the King James.
And they asked me to teach Sunday school. They don't hear it anyway.
Yeah. But
You asked me.
yeah. And that's the thing, when I did preach from the King James, I spent half my time explaining the King James and what those words meant, than just, interpreting scripture. Yeah, I say a third of the church. It was like 8 people, but there was like 25 people. It was a small church in East Tennessee.
That tracks.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was the same one where I got accused of wanting to take prayer out of church. It's not what I'm saying. So
We've never heard you pray.
yeah, that's right. You call that praying?
You're gone. There you go.
So this was a small church, and I preached there a few times, and the search committee loved me, but that was like 5 of them, but there was this one, and most people were kind of indifferent, but there was this one group, like I said, like 8 people who just and one of them included the former pastor's wife, because he had retired, but they didn't leave. They stayed there.
Oh, no.
And so we were doing this question and answer thing one Sunday morning. And they did this thing before Sunday school where they would sing a song and then they would all recite the Lord's Prayer. And I had said something about change. I was still young and dumb and naive enough to think that when a 180-year-old church said they were willing to change some things, they actually meant it, which, they don't. And so if you've been around 180 years, you're probably not changing anything. And so I, they were like, well, what do you think we should change? I was like, well, standing up and reciting the Lord's Prayer all together. If people don't know it, they might be a little put off by it. So we might want to think of changing that up a little bit. And then the former pastor's wife raises her hand. I'm like, yes, ma'am. She's like, my grandson just said they've taken prayer out of the school, and now you want to take it out of the church. I was like, no, ma'am, that is not what I said and not what I meant. And then that's the Sunday when I got up to preach and turned around on the stage, and that whole group was gone. Like, yeah, this is my last Sunday here. Yeah, it was. But, all right, well.
Thanks for the history lesson, and I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, it's all important stuff, and it all helps put everything into perspective. And I anticipated that's how this was going to go tonight, so I was prepared. No, not necessarily you. I just figured.
You can ask these questions.
We just read verse 1 and the beginning of 2, and we defend it.
Yeah. And so we'll get back to it next week and go through the rest. Because you start talking about, in this day and age especially right now with everything going on in the Middle East, you start talking about Jews getting expelled.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, and so you got to kind of figure that's what's going to come up. And so, yeah, I was anticipating that. And so no big deal. We'll just cover 1 through 8 again next week and get a little bit beyond the Jews getting expelled and keep going. We got time. Been in over a year already.
When did we start?
So Sandra was saying last May.
Okay.
So it's been a little over a year. But low and slow.
My Sunday school does all the time.
Hey.
Spend about a year in Matthew, spend over a year in Revelation. Others, not always that long, but
I think it was,
some need it.
yeah, Jay
We
Vernon.
started in May, I got my notes in the same notebook, so.
Okay. J. Vernon McGee spent, was it 3.5 years in Romans?
Oh,
Right.
it's been a long,
Yeah.
it's been about a year in Hebrews.
I took a year, this is actually 2020. I spent a year preaching through 1 Corinthians. Just started at the beginning, went all the way through the end. I broke it up into, I think, like 5 or 6 different series. And then I would preach like a special holiday sermon on each holiday to kind of keep it from getting too, because there were a lot of people there who didn't really like going verse by verse through a book. And so, yeah, well.
The Bible was not their friend.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I won't stop you from saying it.
No, more accurate.
But anyway, so,
Well, they just talk about the Jews with money. My dad used made a comment that he who has the gold makes the rules. And so how they manage to get more and more is through our own greed. We want it now.
yeah,
I'll borrow the money and pay another 25% more so I can have this now.
yeah,
I'll loan it to you, charge you 25% more. Don't complain that I took 25% of your money.
right,
So, and that make people mad because I'm in debt on my head. Well, you signed all the paperwork.
yeah.
So, they've got a history.
They do.
And if you really want to
They
look at
got
other
it, but
countries,
we're gone bankrupt
look
if
at-
not, right?
look at some of the stuff that in our times that England has done, that France has done, that Germany has done.
Yeah, yeah. There's no such thing as a country without blood on its hands, right? I mean, every country that has ever existed, from the first one, has done some pretty terrible things. To suggest that one country is more responsible or more guilty than other countries of anything, from murder to slavery or anything else, it's just nonsense. If you study history, I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying everybody did it, right? Every country has done. In fact, the word slavery comes from the Slavs, the Slavic people who lived up in Eastern Europe. Well, they still live there, but it's because the Arabs, the Muslim slavers, when they invaded Europe, captured a bunch of them and enslaved them and started selling them off, and the word Slav eventually became slave, and so that's where the word slave actually even comes from Eastern Europeans. So it's yeah. And there's no people group in any country on the planet that were the first people to get there. Right? Everybody replaced somebody else, who then got replaced by somebody else, who then got replaced by somebody else. Even the Turks, they were not the first people in what we call Turkey. They actually came from over here, and there were way different people there before they got there. It happens everywhere.
And a lot of what started the downfall of the Jewish people is, I want a king. I am your king.
Yeah.
You don't need a king. I want a king.
Yeah.
What?
Because
Three kings and they're scattered everywhere?
and what was the reason they gave?
Be like the other nations.
They wanted to be like everybody else. And the whole point was,
They're
you're
not.
not supposed to be like everybody else, because you're not like everybody else.
It's like the Christians. We're not supposed to be like everybody else.
Yep.
You really want it? I'll let you have it. You'll
So they
face
got
the
Saul,
consequences.
who,
Do what?
so they got Saul, who looked like what they would want him to look like.
Yeah, Saul became king and Israel lived happily ever after.
He was tall.
No, I'm just kidding. That was a disaster. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Saul was tall and good looking. He looked like a king, so.
Yeah. He may have been 6'6" and handsome instead of 5'9" and bitter. I don't know. He probably was, because we're actually told he was like a head above everybody else. He was probably about 6'2", given the average height of people at that time. He was probably about 6'2", but he was handsome, not bitter. All right.
Not like me.
Of course, he went crazy, so there's that. Do what?
Not like me.
All right. Anything else? I can't wait till next week because it's 7:30. All right. Do what?
I was asking where they lived between where they spilled from Judea to when they got it back. Like they were all over, and they kept getting kicked out. They just like were everywhere.
Yeah, they basically just
Yeah.
bounced around.
You didn't actually have to answer
They want to know.
That does bring up an interesting fact that never gets talked about. When during the 6-Day War, when all the Arabs left Palestine, there were 850,000 Jews expelled from Arab countries in that area, and most of them, at least a couple 100,000 of them, ended up in Israel. And within like 2 years, they were all integrated into Israeli society, and they were all part of the community, and they just kept trucking right along. And so when you look at this tiny little country that takes in a few 100,000 people getting expelled from their homes, and then compare it to the people who had all these places to go to, but nobody would let them in, the Palestinians, it kind of makes you wonder, did they really want to help the Palestinians, or do they just want to use them? Do what? All right, you two gotta separate next week.
They didn't let us sit together in high school.
Yeah.
We were different grades.
Yeah, we don't didn't have any glasses.
I was gonna say, there's no guys back there to keep you under control.
That's all we need.
Yeah, I don't think sending Kent in between them is gonna help much.
No.
Maybe Troy, but not Kent.
Whatever, they're worse.
They are.
I just have a question for Lucy. So how come it is bad when the bodyguards killed the kings, but when the king's wife killed him, he deserved it?
Whoa.
Because, did you hear what he was like?
I see.
Because it was a funny thing to
Those
say.
guys needed it.
Reason behind it.
But
I mean, obviously he deserved it, he's dead.
is that how that works? That's good to know.
We can just move on now.
Good plan.
Okay. Let's take some prayer requests.
I want to pray